Okay, welcome to this afternoon's third session on the Leadership Digital Transformation Programme. We will be moving through the first couple of pillars of the Educational Transformation Framework from Microsoft. So without any further delay, let's move into the main presentations. So we will be looking at how we can elevate the use of the Educational Transformation Framework in your school and how that can transform the vision and the capacity for change, and just how it can structure that for you. So we will be looking at creating a vision for your digital transformation. We'll be looking then at the leadership and policy pillar, and additionally we'll be looking at the teaching and learning pillar. We will have a quick reference to how Microsoft Teams can be a hub to support that and ensure that communication is clear. It can be a really good place to put any sort of those vision documents or those improvement plans in one central location so they can be read by everybody and picked up with ease, and also people can contribute to them as well. So today's session is, as I said, session 3 of 7. We've got a few more sessions to go, running up to the 10th of December. And as people come to the sessions, we encourage you to come to as many as possible. And I'm aware that some people have diary clashes, and I completely understand that. I used to work in schools myself. But as long as you can catch up on the video, that is absolutely fine. If you do miss something, you can always drop me an email. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you individually. We this afternoon are going to look then at how the framework can act as a whole and how that impacts upon this rapidly changing world we touched upon previously. Even now, continuing through into the autumn, the amount of change and constant daily review that schools, trusts and academies are undertaking is astounding, and the impact it has upon trying to just deliver a high quality education and remain consistent either throughout your own school or academy or across a trust with multiple academies is even more challenging. And having a leadership digital transformation plan based on the ETF and Microsoft can help with that, and also help highlight some of the pitfalls. So we've gone through various evolutions and industrial revolutions in the past, and then that moved into the next phase, which was the second industrial revolution. We went from steam and big clunky machines to more refined machines, example of the gramophone there. And then we got technical and we started to bring in computers that took up the size of the room, and gradually they've scaled in size and their capabilities. And that was a definite third industrial revolution of change. But we are now firmly in the fourth industrial revolution, and that is more about artificial intelligence, machine learning. It's less about the machine, it's more about the algorithms and the programming behind it, and those sorts of realities that we're going to be preparing the children that we're teaching now for in the future. And that we do need to be quite agile and nimble with the way that we flex in schools, and we've demonstrated that recently with the coronavirus and everything we've had to put in place at short notice. In some traditional methods of teaching have had to be complemented with other vehicles to deliver the curriculum or deliver pastoral care. And as educationalists, we are great at change because we rapidly have to change. Constantly we structure that change so that it's easier to manage and that we can take it in smaller bite-sized pieces, even though everything else is going on around us. Digital curriculum, and also giving the correct support for all the that change, and it doesn't provide. It's almost divisive, where some people fly because maybe naturally they're very happy at home, and others also things like that, because you've got people that are ignoring it, opting out, and not coming to your racing, and then you can get that chasm in the middle that we spoke about last time. Back to the reality of where we are now. There's 6.5 million jobs that are going to be created by 2022 just in the IT industry alone that are in cloud related fields, some of which may not even be fully realized yet, and others that are just growing. That the youth unemployment globally is rising, and what can we do in our vision, not only to improve communications in school, but also prepare the young individuals better for the world that they're going. And really, that comes back considering the flexible and less rigid. Could we do a bit more of our learning using okay? Well, that maybe we could go out and have access to things, maybe of a pond, nature reserve area. Take into context and bring it in there. You have. I'm going to speak a little more slowly, just in case the connection is lagging. I will try dropping off and coming back if it's a continual problem. The change also would consider how we can bring about the personal learning, and then apply depth of learning to that. So it's not shallow, that the opportunity you've got and the technique allows pupils to dive deeper than that before, explore the curriculum and understand maybe in ways that complement those traditional methods, but they either get engrossed or get involved, or at the same time we find that they engage with something for the first time because they didn't see it previously. So there's lots of opportunities there that allow you to then complement the curriculum or complement the wider school functions that we will be interested in today, and we will be thinking about how they impact upon our school. So the EF really is about trying to think about what I discussed a moment ago, making sure that everybody comes with you, that everybody understands with clarity what the vision is and how it's going to work. That also that we capitalize upon good practice around us. That could be schools in a local area. That might be a Microsoft Showcase school that's already using this technology extremely well, that you can contact and you can arrange to discuss with them. Maybe in the future you can even have a visit, but certainly now you could arrange a Teams meeting. And also that the educational transformation framework, which this whole course is based upon, is grounded in global research. It's not just something that Microsoft have conceived and we thought it might be a good idea. There's lots of people globally that are using this to bring about school. So, pillars leadership and policy and teaching and learning. And one of the things that I asked you to do from the last meeting was to have a go at completing the self-assessment tool, just understand where you are now as a school and also where you want to be in the future. So Steph, as you're the only person on the call at the moment, did you get a chance to have a look at that at all, or did you get any feedback from it?
I did actually do it previously. I think after the MIEE course we did through you guys. So I did have it to hand.
Yes.
It shows links underneath each section on my report. It shows links of where to go to, of how it can help.
Yeah.
So I've been looking through that as well, and just trying to set up of trying to put things in place, like using notebooks in Key Stage 2 and things during through their teams.
Yes.
That's kind of the first part of my report. Basically, I'm running on.
Steph, I think I'm losing you this end.
I was going to say, I can hear you now.
Okay, you're definitely back. Phased out for about 30 seconds there, but you're back loud and clear currently.
Ah, yeah. So can you hear me still?
I can, yes.
Just to say that I'm trying to implement the teams through the school, starting with Key Stage 2, really, up Key Stage 2, and trying to get them on the OneNote, working through that.
Being a platform that all teachers could tap into to deliver learning resources, how do you think that will play out in your school?
Well, on your last recording that I managed to catch up the end of today, it was showing some great insight into the OneNote, how it can actually, well, utilise it everywhere, which is what I'm hoping for. And yes. Also, I wanted to model to the teachers like year by year and drop down each year and hope that they can all access it more as the day-to-day runs. Because we haven't quite got there yet.
It sounds like a good plan. I see a lot of schools having success with that gradual cascading down and establishing in years above, whether it's pupils as digital leaders or staff, and then you can gradually build that capacity.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. I'm going to flick back over to the presentation again, but feel free to add anything in as we go through.
Okay.
So the pillars we are going to focus on in session 3 today is the leadership and policy pillar. We'll also focus on the teaching and learning pillar, and then in future meetings we'll look at the on leadership and policy. So that is subdivided as a pillar into 4 more areas. So we'll look at vision for change, looking at how that we can use that leadership and policy to plan strategically and bring about, but also about how that would then transition into continuous improvement. And then wider, how is our school as a community going to engage, and do we need to form any partnerships in order to be successful in this? The 4 areas are really key and they do go hand in hand, and you may not get to all of them straight away, but certainly at a very high level, when you come to plan within this pillar, it's worth thinking about each and jotting down your initial ideas. And then what a lot of schools do is they pick the one that's relevant and the burning issue for them. So it might be actually the strategic and management. Often for schools it is strategic planning and change management, or vision for change are the 2 that people start with, and then go back to continuous improvement and culture, and then community engagement and partnerships. So you've established and cemented, you share that vision and you get everybody moving with you on that, and then you think about, well, how is that going to fit with the wider community? Microsoft have got a very clear vision for their change, that they want every learner on the planet to achieve more, and they firmly believe that the educational transformation framework will be something that you can use not just to put meaningless devices into classrooms, and that's not what we're about at all. It's about when to select the device, using it to aid the quality of teaching and learning, that people become independent in choosing, in the end, beyond you having an input as a teacher, choosing when it's going. Now, I appreciate in every school it's not always possible to have devices available all the time, and then I could say, well, if we know that we've only have laptops, we end up bringing them into the classroom on the day a week or the afternoon a week. We've got some time with them, and at that point, I say to my pupils, "You've got choice. What do you want to use? How do you want to go about solving this?" It might be that some people decide to do a Sway, others decide to use OneNote, some people decide to go and use Minecraft and build an immersive world, but they're making choices in how they want to present the outcomes from their learning, and it adds value that way. Disconnect this end and reconnect and see if that helps with the next side. So it really comes over across to what your vision is and bringing that vision to fruition. thinking about, well, what do I need in the flexibility and quality process? And have I got the right people around me? And in that leadership team, which is going to be dedicated to creating this vision or even revisiting a vision, because some schools have vision, just who's going to be the key people to get involved, and can they be released? Are they already currently committed to other professional development? And how might that then allow you to gain the capacity to initially have the change process mapped out and also think about what the So the questions that people ask, reflective questions that you think about, well, to what extent do we as educators and staff need new technologies, or do we actually have in place the hardware to do this? And then how does the school support that learning culture? And how are learners as pupils already self-directed in making those choices, or is it something that we can change, that we can influence by just making? And well, how can we involve other stakeholders? That is a sort of a enterprise word, I appreciate, but how do we get these wider group of staff? Have I got somebody who's got a really special piece of knowledge? Maybe in their spare time they do something to do with Office 365 or planning or computing that we can build back in, but also making sure that staff, what's important there, change process, talking to people and understanding how they feel, what they think about lessons, and how they think that technology be, and also how you are. Sorry, Steph, I'm just going to go across and look. Okay, Steph, it's to reset the wireless, and I'll be back. One moment. Can you hear me again, Steph? Okay, I should be back online. Everybody able to hear me? Are you able to hear me clearly now? Thank you. With the planning and support and evaluation in the middle column that I am sharing, the other process is thinking about in school, to what extent are we already in line with what we want to achieve? Where do we think there may be questions over improving the leadership direction of the school and being really clear about what we want this to look like? And maybe it's somebody needs to spend some time just getting their head around it first. So as you said, Steph, it could be an example of OneNote. In OneNote, it's going to be a cornerstone of what we want to bring in as far as a leadership team, but we just need a bit of time ourselves to investigate it, maybe get a couple of teachers experimenting with it that are open to new technologies. And then from that process, start to understand exactly how it might shape up for our school. And then linked to that, there may be policies that need revising. It might be your e-learning policy. It could be such as safeguarding. It could be a policy you have around device provision. But all of that needs potentially updating or tweaking, and that falls into this wider remit of considering it in the pillar that we're looking at today. So the community engagement and partnerships bit means, to what extent is the school going to engage with parents? How are they going to be brought into this? I know certainly with schools that have been through the DFE process, where the Teams learning platform has been provided and built, there's been some very careful consideration gone into how do we roll this out to parents? How do we make sure they understand this is going to be a single individual hub, and it's going to be used for delivering the distance learning to the pupils when they can't be with us, and how they can then support their son or daughter effectively, in turn to support the school to make sure their child makes the process that we wish for them, but also that they feel like it's not another barrier to them being successful and it upsets them. So it's really important to think about the community internally, but also the community externally, and how you can cement those partnerships. A lot of people, when they're rolling out aspects of Office 365, are also getting parent sessions laid on so that they can get involved. And you do often find that there's somebody that's doing something in their workplace that can maybe offer or complement what you're doing in school, or even bolster the capacity you've got to bring about this change. So the questions for reflection in this section is thinking about parents and families, all those aspects about what devices they have at home, how confident are they in using that? Do we need to provide some training for those parents, or is it governance that we're talking about in this situation? And also, could we do anything to give back to the local community? Is there maybe a very close group we're working with, such as Friends of or PTA, and they're really struggling during this time to engage with the wider community around them, or they haven't got the technology available to them? And could you extend that branch of opportunity to them and get them involved in having the technology to be successful themselves? So the reflection point here is, what on earth would your education system look like? And I've got a document that will help you do that. So everybody that's signed up for the meeting today, you can have access to a shared drive file in SharePoint. And in that folder, there will be a vision and priorities document. I'm just going to stop sharing this session. I'm going to swing across to the other session and just consider what that looks like. Just opening that one up. And reshare my screen. My computer's decided to have a go slow this afternoon. We all suffer from it at some point. Let's try that one more time. Third time's a charm. Let's go for it. That should be it. Let me display that full screen. So one of the documents that you will receive from the session this afternoon is the visions, priorities, and metrics. And it talks you through an example there of QMON and how they went about creating their vision statement, and thinking about, well, what length of years am I going to talk in, first of all? Am I only looking at a shorter 3-year plan or a 5-year plan? I would encourage you to look towards the 5-year plan and plan more thoroughly for the first 3 years, and then plan those last 2 years more loosely. And as it rolls forwards, you can always add to those, but sometimes it doesn't look quite far enough ahead if you're just dealing with just the 3 years initially. So in the table below, it gives you an opportunity to knock around and write up your vision statement. So this will be a document you can write in. Microsoft prepared these documents a little strangely in a PowerPoint format, and they don't convert that nicely to Word documents or any other type of document for writing in. But I will ask some people in future sessions to share back these vision statements. So if you've got one and you've already created, and as a school you know where you're going with this, just pop it in there so you can capture it all in one place. The second page we will come on to in another part of the session. So I'm just going to swap the screen over. It finally works, Dan. And I'm going to go back to the other presentation. Right, moving back across. We normally would give you 15 minutes to go away and do that live in the session, but as we've structured this program, the Leadership and Digital Transformation program, slightly differently, the face-to-face time has been minimized because we know the pressures that there are in schools at the moment. So we're going to pass these documents to you, and then you have a go at them between sessions, and whether it's written or whether it's just an idea in your head, we will then revisit them at the beginning of next session, and we'll pick up what they've uncovered for you. If you're struggling with coming up with a vision, or whichever aspect we're looking at as we go through, so that as a group we can work on how to solve that and how to then support each other. So we'll skip think, pair, share. The success in leading change really comes from thinking about the why and your vision. And then when you've got that, thinking about those enthusiastic individuals, those digital leaders, and also listening to those people that are concerned, that feel a bit unsettled about this change process. And although in education we are used to change and it's constantly thrust upon us from various different angles, that we make sure that we've got everyone feeling as comfortable and included as we can, so that holistic approach is really important, and that we don't want anybody feeling that they aren't able to be successful in joining in and getting their needs met, that we are making sure that absolutely everybody is in there and that they know what they're going on. An example of a vision statement, yes, there's an example of a vision statement in the form that I'm going to give you, and that's the one for the Kumon example, but I can try and also dig out a school vision statement from one of the schools we've possibly worked with, so that you can see what maybe a school vision statement looks like. It doesn't have to be a very long document. It's that thinking about the why is quite important, the why you want to make that change and how that vision is going to be realised. But the Kumon example is there, and I will try to find another example to see if we can complement that. The next document we're going to provide you with, again for you to complete between sessions, is the leadership and policy. Let's see if we can more smoothly share that this time. Let's go across. So it's going to play ball now. And as we're looking at the leadership and policy pillar, there's 4 really important questions for reflection here. Once you've got your vision planned on that first document about the vision and the metrics and measurement, we need to think about, well, we've got the vision for transformation now, but has everybody bought into that? And if we can identify those groups which are less likely to buy in, the thought process, however challenging it is to think about, well, why are they less likely to buy in? What's going to be the barrier to getting them going in the same direction as us? And then the next question is about how decisions are made about strategy and policy. We talked last time about the most effective change strategy, and it isn't top down. It's about that getting the whole school with you and them understanding why a policy's in place, why a decision's been made, even if it is something they don't agree with. If they can understand why it's there, and maybe it actually helps most of the school, it can be a lot more open in the change and understanding the change and getting on board with the change, rather than no, well, it doesn't apply to me, so therefore I'm just going to ignore it and I'm going to rail against you. Also, the values of your school, and does the vision that you've decided upon reinforce those values of the school? It should complement them, it should work with them, it shouldn't work against them or suddenly veer off in a different direction. Otherwise, maybe you need to go back and visit the values, and the values of the school are obviously actually at the core of what it does. So the vision should fit around the values and build upon them and not detract from them or do something that's exactly opposite. And the final question to reflect upon there is who are the strategic partners here? Who are you going to rely upon for support? It could be Turn It On. You may be going to Microsoft. You may be networking with other schools. Maybe you've hooked up with a showcase school and actually there's somebody there who's really working closely with you because they've gone through this before and they're at the other end of the process. The questions that are on here, you don't necessarily have to write answers down or type them in. They could be something you just think about and you then reflect upon and come back ready to talk about them next time. But the questions in the document I'm going to share are there to stimulate that thought process and just give you something to hang your thoughts around. And jump out of that one and go back and share the other one. Continuing through this afternoon. So the vision for change is about that ability to visualize and articulate that to everyone in your organization with a couple of Z's there in an American way. But as the Harvard Business Review says, it's really vital that you always remember that you need some clear leadership, and the leadership should be constant, and then that change may not be something quick and snappy that's achievable overnight, and very often that change is going to be a very long and entrenched process, and that's not a bad thing because it gives you time to work upon it and refine it as you go along. But also you have to acknowledge that there are going to be people that either fall off the wagon and stop seeing your vision as clearly, or there'll be those that will challenge your vision as you go along, and that you need to be prepared and ready to explain that from a leadership perspective and to get them to understand clearly where you're coming from and why it's so important to the values of the school and how it's going to impact positively across everybody's role. So that clarity of vision, leadership vision for change here is the focus. And going through the importance of the clear vision for your school, you need to be able to provide that focus, and you need to think about how it then manifests across the wider school. You need to then clarify what are the priorities and work with the individuals, and the priorities will be different for the individuals across your school. Make sure that you've got that planning in place from the vision statement right the way through to how you are going to bring that change about and realize it. And then articulate it regularly, whether it's you incorporate it in weekly staff briefings, you revisit it once a month in your whole staff meetings, whether you get people that are leading various elements to feedback, so it's not just the leadership team always presenting that, but then think about the opportunity to pause and revisit with the staff regularly. Is this still working with you? Do you feel it's still having the same impact? Is it we're going in the same direction? And get the feedback from everyone. And that means pupils or students as well as the staff in the school. And I think most importantly here, that remember in this leadership and change pillar, the transformation is about people. Yes, we're putting in potentially technology to support them, but it's people and their habits and their needs that we need to address more than anything else. Last time we looked at a graph, and I spoke earlier in this session about not the chasm in the middle, but we need to get these pragmatists to stick with the herd. And if we don't, we'll lose them, and they'll seep backwards into people that are more conservative and don't want to go with that change quite so willingly. And they'll just wait for those people that are leading the charge, the visionaries and the enthusiasts across here to the left, to go through, address those pitfalls, wrinkle out the problem, iron out the wrinkles and the problems, and then come through. And you need to be really honest that you're going to do your best to provide with your planning the best quality platform solutions that you can give. And you may get people to test them in advance, but you also need to be realistic that there will be other stumbling blocks as it's refined, as it becomes fit for purpose, and as it suits everybody within their roles and the needs of those roles in the school. In that they need to feed that back in a positive way and not have a moan about it in the staff room and just let it become a negative cycle. Turn it into a positive for change, turn it into feeding back into the plan, turn it back into maybe even reshaping the vision. If something isn't working, you need to consider a different option, but making sure that chasm doesn't open up and swallow the change process and the vision whole. And the 5 building blocks for the successful change has to be an awareness of what's going on, the desire for the change and the desire to be part of it, that you have the knowledge as the leadership team to bring about that change, and that maybe bringing in external knowledge because somebody knows more than you to get you going, and then you know your school well and you know that's right for your school. Thinking about the ability for that change and then reinforcing that change so that you continually go back and revisit it, and you know that you make that change stick, and that stickiness is really important if the vision has become part of the values and the culture, and it's going to stay around for any length of time, and it's not just seen as a short burst strategy that the leadership team is going to forget in a while and we can go back to doing things how we always did. So you need to think about who are your champions and your early adopters, who are digital evangelists, but then also how that they can form part of a team to affect the wider community and bring them all on board and make sure that that change is consistent and that it has longevity in the way that you're working in school. I think here the Thought Company tried to encapsulate that in the quote that we see on screen, that when you get everybody working in that same direction, amazing transformation will happen, and that change will be faster in the end than you hoped for because everybody's pulling. But everybody does need to be aligned and need to be with you, and you need to do what you can to visit all those groups on the graph that we looked at. Satya Nadella, who heads up Microsoft at the moment, he always thinks of it in the way that the culture needs to start with a growth mindset. Recently, we really have had to adopt the growth mindset in education, and the things that we may not have wanted to do, maybe as teachers or even sometimes pupils in the classroom or parents at home, we've had to think about, well, we've got no choice. We have to go with this change, and keeping that growth mindset open. And we're really good at talking to pupils about growth mindset, but we aren't always so good about talking about, as professionals, the growth mindset as staff, and that is really key to this whole process. I'm going to skip past that slide. So the benefits to everyone, the benefits will be far reaching if you've got that clarity of vision, you've got the plan to deliver it, you're regularly revising that plan and revisiting it, you've got your community on board, and you're thinking about internally and externally how you make sure that their needs are met, but also how you make sure that they stay with you at the same time. It becomes a better place because you find that people get that clarity of communication comes, but also that families suddenly feel more supported and more inclusive within the school and the outreach from the school, that their son or daughter is supported in their learning in ways that they weren't previously. Maybe they can go to teams and they can pick up assignments, and it used to be just a piece of paper come home, and sometimes they got lost in the book bag or it didn't really in the diary, but the parent can see what's written for the pupil in teams in the assignment section, and then they can better support the school because they can support their child. It's also for the pupils to be able to go and look at what they have to do. It could be quality of homework for assignments. It could be that they look at OneNote class notebook that we spoke about in the previous session. And it's just something as simple as they're at home, they don't have their paper book with them, but what they could do if the planning for the teacher is in the OneNote is they could go back and they could look at that and they could revisit it when they need to or when it's absolutely important, particularly if this is impacting upon them being successful in their homework. And then the teachers as well, having opportunities to meet together, whether you say it needs to go on the agenda is subject coordinator meetings, key stage meetings with phase leaders, or whether you're going to just put it onto the whole staff meeting agenda and you're going to have an opportunity to talk about it there, but also not forgetting about the other roles in the school and making sure that everybody has a platform to contribute and talk about how it's feeling for them and if it needs to be tweaked even further still. And that, thinking about the different hats that we wear in school, we might have our more formal leadership management hat, and it might be that some things there are a yes or a no, or it might be that you've got that more creative hat going on. And we often encourage during these sessions for people, if there's time, to think about how they would react to the change process with a different hat on. And if we pose a scenario, how they would react to that change depending on what their viewpoint is, where they work in the school, how much it's going to affect them, how much it's going to benefit them. And those need to be the sort of questions that you're asking yourself in this wider change process. So when you're thinking about the metrics that you're going to measure the success of the change, think about the driving the strategy and the direction it's going in. Think about how the metrics are going to help you make decisions. If you're getting some feedback about the impact that they're having, that can then inform the change or the longer term 5-year plan. Also, consider about every employee in the school and their role. Is it going to touch upon them? Is it going to be irrelevant to them? And is it largely going to pass them by? If you're going to bring about this change, it's thinking about, well, who do we need to get in the room, but also how does it affect them and how does it affect their day-to-day role? And is there something in their role that they may not have envisaged themselves that is a element where it could benefit them, it could make their life easier, it could make their communication with people where they previously had to maybe, I don't know, make a phone call or walk across the whole school site, where they could quickly pop them a message in Teams and they could get that answer back more readily. So you're improving communication across the schools. There's lots of different considerations to have in your metrics. Certainly, one of the ways to think about it is to use a GQM for actionable priority. So you have your objective, what you want to achieve, and you need to ask the questions and then think about what the metrics, the quantifiable metrics are to measure the success of the change. So an example of that fleshed out might be that our objective is to be healthy. So one of the questions we might ask ourselves was, how much do I weigh? Am I at risk of a heart attack? Can I run without getting tired? So a way to measure that. And then down here would be the metrics that we use. So the questions that we've got could link to all the metrics. They may just link to a few of the metrics, but you've got something to measure it against. And it's really important in that change process that you go and you revisit the metrics that you believe are important to your school and check the impact of the change. And if you find that there's absolutely no change, then you do need to pause and stop the process and go back and ask, why is there no change? What's the reason for it? And try to get to the bottom of it and address that reason and not just ignore it blindly forward, because that was in your long-term plan that you set out and it's associated with your vision. So to support you in doing that, we've got a good old smart grid based around the 4 pillars. So if I quickly jump out of this, I'll show you that in reality. And I'm going to jump across to the other screen. So from the same document where you've got visions, priorities, and metrics, your vision and your vision statement is on the first page. On the second page, you then need to do what we just discussed in that flow diagram, that you identify what your priorities are in each of the 4 pillars. So certainly for session 3, we're only looking at leadership policy and teaching and learning. And you write down in bullet point form, keep it really brief, but thinking of the SMART mantra, what your priorities are. And then over here to the right-hand side, identify what your metrics are to measure the success of the change. And many times I've seen that this process falls over because people are really keen to get their vision created and think about how they're going to bring about the change, talk to lots of people in their school, be it staff or students and pupils, but they may even consider the priorities, but what they fail to think about is how they're going to measure the impact of it. So with that in mind, this document is quite useful to just at a very high level prioritize what they are and then think about the associated metrics. If there isn't enough space on there, you can draw it out in the same way that in the example I showed you just a moment ago, but do take some time to capture them and use this as almost like a foundation or a cornerstone to starting this change process. Just going to swap screens again. And jump back into the other presentation. Or maybe not. Let's try that one last time. There we go. So that activity we would normally do during a session, but given the time pressures on us and that you can manage that more effectively outside of one of these live sessions, you'll get that sheet shared with you and you can go away and then fill it in. It doesn't need chapter and verse written down, but what we're trying to help you do here in the leadership and digital transformation sessions is to begin this journey. And it will be a long-term journey, but also give you some of the tools to get there from the educational transformation framework, which is why we're sharing these documents with you, and why it's so important to revisit them regularly and discuss them across all the staff in the school and make sure that everybody's had a chance to contribute. And it's really important to go and talk about their requirements. What are their core values? What do they need to be considered when this change is taking place? So that's pillar one. And then the next pillar this afternoon is to consider the culture of teaching and learning in the school, which, Steph, that may be more at heart of what you're used to focusing on, certainly where you've come from in your journey through the school. And we need to think about that student-centered learning. What is it going to look like for them? The pedagogy involved in good quality teaching and learning. Then also classroom assessment. How can it complement the ability to deliver a high quality, far ranging curriculum, but also to assess the progress that pupils are making, both formatively and summatively. Also the consideration of the devices that we're working with. There may be some limitations to how ambitious we can be because we have a very old set of laptops, or maybe we just have an IT suite and we don't even have the luxury of laptops. And that ICT suite's a little bit ailing and needs some upgrading. So we have to be realistic and work with the devices we have. But then also, if we are thinking about not just the devices, what's the learning space? Is it something that's going to foster us to have a growth mindset, work creatively? And that is hard in the current situation to push back the tables and maybe make space in the room or reorganize the room for a week while you were working on a project, because we've got to fit around COVID risk assessments. But thinking of the longer term, the educational transformation framework is going to be that 3 to 5 year plan. And we can start to plan for that now. Well, we may be more restricted now. We'll have greater opportunities in the future. So thinking about how we collaborate online, we spent quite a bit of time in the earlier sessions in the leadership and digital transformation program, looking about how pupils or students can communicate with teachers, and that might be in a more formal sense through OneNote Class Notebook, or it could be in a product like Teams, whereas they haven't previously been able to speak with their teacher, but all of a sudden they've got a digital virtual environment where they could then post something or reply to a post from their peers or reply to a post from their teachers. And it's also considering apps from other sources and how they could be brought in. So we might have Lego sets, we may have WeDos, or we might have any sort of Lego sets. And how could that be built in? How could we maybe use that for computing curriculum and physically building that and then programming it with algorithms? Could that be brought in, and could that then be used to complement the assessment where we've got visible, tangible examples that are easier to assess? But then maybe that could be captured back in a page of a OneNote, or it could be posted as a picture from a pupil that's got a laptop and they've pictured what they're doing and then they post it into the team. So there's lots of different ways to work through that and make the most of what you've got. And it's really important to think about at the moment that there's going to be a tug in war between traditional methods and also these digital methods that you're going to bring out through this teaching and learning pillar. But it's also really important that we talk to staff about that up front, that they all know that we aren't on a mission to replace traditional teaching methods and pen and paper or pencil and paper, because we know that we've got certain things we have to do when we're delivering the curriculum. Whether we like it or not, there's going to be periods in time where a pupil has to sit down and complete a paper-based assessment, and that's going to be within a time frame, and the school's going to be measured upon that. But what we could capitalize upon are creative ways of maybe helping them with their knowledge in the journey to an answer. If it was maybe maths, we could use something like Minecraft and we're looking at areas or perimeters. Or we could use it for that space in between the core curriculum to get creative with the other elements of the curriculum or other subjects within the curriculum. We want to avoid that tech-heavy education. It should feel more like a natural way of complementing what we're doing, and that it's not forced or contrived that we're using technology in our roles. And the virtual learning space has also become a warm, welcoming environment, just like the physical space in the classroom, in that pupils feel as a home there, getting involved in teaching and learning as they do in the physical classroom with you as a teacher face to face. So one of the things that you would think about is, well, what's going to be the ideal activities for our devices? Where do our devices naturally lend themselves? And actually, it's not about the device necessarily. Yes, we want a reliable device. Yes, we want something that's going to work in the way we expect it to, so that as a teacher, we don't get the frustration that it becomes the barrier to delivering a successful lesson. But very often, the device is not such an issue. It might be that you need a touch-enabled device, and actually something would work better on a touch-enabled device, but very often the keyboard can lend itself quite nicely to doing that. It can often be that the choice of platform that we get on the screen can sometimes make the device feel slightly contrived or slightly like it's not working with us. So it's thinking about, well, yes, we've got a device and we have to work with what we've got, but also we need to think about the applications we then present on that device. And is the application going to cause a frustration about a supposed or a perceived limitation of the device? And actually, it's just that we need to wait until we reinvest or we refresh a set of laptops, and maybe we've got touchscreen devices with a stylus, and then we can make more of something in Office 365 at a later date. But we just have to, as much as we want to, we have to park it for now and make that part of our learning transformation at a later date. And that becomes maybe year 4 or 5. We have to make the most of what we've got and what we exist with at the moment in years 1 to 3. So thinking about with the learning spaces and the environment we have around us, we know at the moment that it is more limited due to the restrictions we have in the risk assessments. But if we're looking at a refresh of an IT suite, or we're looking at, if we're ever lucky enough to have the budget for it, getting new furniture in the classroom, it's thinking about, well, what sort of learning environment does that create? Now, we're always going to be considering that as educationalists, but also we can think about, well, does that learning environment lend itself to bringing in the use of technology in a larger way? Can we have a classroom so it's not a big event where we go and get the trolley and wheel it down the corridor? Can some of those devices be based in the classroom? Does that not work for us? Because actually we haven't got the budget to have a second set of 30 laptops and some devices in a classroom. It could be around desks and the way the desks fold or move back. It could be around the way that desks come together for group work. So if you were doing an exercise, maybe it's stop-go animation, you want to capture it. If you could push a set of 2 or 3 desks together and then people can get around that with devices, it's going to be far easier for that work than it is if they've got to then suddenly start to drag and lift, and it becomes an issue to move the classroom, and actually it's quite rigid in the way that it's organized, and it doesn't give you that flexibility. So with that personalized education classroom tools, it's also thinking about school-wide. If we've achieved it in one area, is it possible to achieve it in another area, or are we making it look like one class is very lucky and they're being put up on a pedestal, and yes, it works for that one fortunate teacher that has those facilities? How could we, in the most cost-effective way possible, bring about the possibilities for pupil learning, that there can be change in ways that we approach it, and there's flexibility in the way that we approach it, but do it at the lowest cost point? And again, that might need some planning. That might need to discuss with classroom redesign. Maybe you've got a building and extension project going on, and that you could get some money from that to actually help to modernise or change the existing classrooms. And thinking about that bigger picture in your school and what that would look like. So to support you in doing that, we have another document, and this time it's focused on teaching and learning. So I'm just going to jump out of the main presentation and hopefully swap over to the other presentation. And look at that sheet with you just a moment. Just bring that up full scale. So again, these are reflective questions, just like the leadership sheet. And thinking about for these, either in a written way or just bearing them in mind for the next session, what do you need to think about in order to improve the opportunities for personalised learning? It could be that you are just distributing different pages in OneNote class notebook, and that you differentiate the learning by pupils getting a different sheet to work on. And instead of it being a physical sheet in your classroom, you're doing that electronically. And then you're using some of the tools in there, maybe like the maths tool, for pupils to be independent in their learning and checking what they're doing and checking their answers. And if it's wrong, being directed to a website to check and so forth. You also want to think about how you're going to assess and how you're going to understand, has that transformation in the education system impacted positively upon them and their education in the school. You also want to think about the devices you've got and the pedagogical and the safety needs. Is there something that needs to be fundamentally changed? Are they right for us in the long term? Have we just invested and actually we're stuck with them? So we need to think about pedagogically what we do to make the most of where we are and how we could bring in good practice. And then at the bottom of there, you can also think about considerations that you're going to make about the physical learning space. Is there breakout areas we could visit? So is the library or a learning resource centre in secondaries, is it underused, underutilised? Could we start to have an area there where we could take pupils to, maybe split the class in half? So if you know you've got a member of support staff and they could go and work with an intervention group there where you could keep the main of the class. And with those strategies we do absolutely every day for high quality teaching and learning, but could the same be achieved with electronic devices or using a particular aspect of Office 365? Swap back across. And just bring that up to full screen. Again, we would normally undertake that activity in a pause point between the sessions, but as this afternoon we're doing this as an after school session, something we'd ask you to go away and have a go at, and we'll share those sheets again as a share link, and anybody that signed up for this session will get that share link sent to them on their email address. So with the teaching, learning and assessment, it's thinking, okay, this is what we desire as a leadership team. This is what our teachers want as educators. We can't ignore the other key people here. So we need to talk about the IT professionals. If we don't get them working with us, or they may see a limitation, or they may see a problem about a delay of a rollout, and okay, that problem's not going to stop us, but actually it may slow down what we wanted to achieve. Well, let's say that you need to create some accounts for pupils to get them into a team, so therefore they can get to OneNote class notebook. That might not be something that can be delivered in the first month, and that may need a longer time to plan that in. And that's why it's really important to make sure that you do get all of those groups involved around the table, and they have an opportunity to articulate how they think it's going to impact their area of delivery. And also if it's going to be something they can achieve, or if it's something that's almost impossible and they're finding really difficult. It may be that you have to accept that it's a longer time frame than you desired, but you can get there. It's just then thinking through how on earth you do manage to achieve that. We'll skip forwards a little bit. So questions on reflection, devices and connectivity. Have you got the infrastructure to support those devices in school? Have you got a wireless network that's capable? Then physically, have you got those devices? Are there things around the administrative side, the IT support? Are we also future ready as a school? Is our curriculum embracing things like STEM? Are staff still avoiding teaching computer science because it's scary and it talks about things like algorithms and debugging and so forth? What are our general technology skills like within our teaching staff? Are they going to find it really onerous to have to make time to learn a new system? Is it something, excuse me, they can bring in to their practice quite easily with a bit of training and support? And something we shouldn't underestimate here in the teaching and learning is keeping our pupils and students safe. The considerations around safeguarding and e-safety should be absolutely paramount, and also the data and not having data leaking from the school and having things like a data breach on the GDPR. And if you're signing up to a new platform and you're bringing in as part of the process, that you complete things like a DPIA, digital privacy impact assessment, in advance to understand if you're going to share data with someone else or a new organization, a new platform and a new UI, is it going to be GDPR compliant, or do we need to assess that before we start to bring that in and brief it into staff, or we even discuss with staff for considering this as another option to enhance the learning through the technology? So the bigger picture of the educational transformation framework hopefully is emphasizing to you that you do need to think, what are the next steps for your organization? And planning them out all the time and breaking them into the smallest steps possible to build a roadmap is really key. knowing what you want to achieve in the first year. And the first year, often for a lot of schools, is just about refining that vision, check it meets the core values and the direction of travel for the school. If it's got any development priorities, maybe from Ofsted inspections, or if it knows it's identified areas in the school where it's got a weakness, could be maybe you're focusing on reading or writing. Well, what is there? It could be that the accessibility tools that we're going to look at in one of the future sessions will allow you to raise standards, particularly with pupils that have got a low literacy level maybe, and they're struggling to access those resources. And the technology then could really complement and help you drive that forwards. So your roadmap could be very simplistic, set as a group of circles, or if you don't tend to like that visual method and you're more of a linear thinker, you can have a grid or a table, and then it's breaking that down into people and capacity, the cultures and processes, that connected community and the technology to support it. What are we going to be doing in year 1? What are we going to be doing in year 2, right the way through to year 5? Or the other model would look more like that, and you will have those overlapping circles with year 1 at the center and then mushrooming out as it goes along. And we've got a planning document, unsurprisingly, to help you with that. So if I jump out of that presentation a moment, and this is the final planning document for this afternoon, and again, it will be all sent across to you on the share links. This helps you with that longer term planning to structure it. So if I just share that one now. What you have in this document is, for the grid method, you've got your year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 broken down into your different areas. So this is really meant to be planning for senior leaders and middle leaders to get that roadmap for development once you've established your vision. If you are more of a creative circle type, you can then link on the lines here what your roadmap for development is going to be for each of the years and set it out that way. It's up to you which side of that sheet that you use. You only have to use one of them, but take the one that makes the most sense to you or sits best with the leadership team in the school planning change. So as far as the session was considered this afternoon, we are looking at bringing in the leadership element and also the teaching and learning element as the 2 pillars of the educational transformation framework that we want to focus on and we want to drive home in the first of these ETF sessions. And this is the first of the leadership digital transformation sessions, of session 3, that hasn't brought about a linked product from Office 365 that might help you. This session is almost exclusively focused on what we can do with the educational transformation framework from Microsoft to structure this change process. And as I said, you will take time over this. You'll get a limited amount of time to discuss it, and I appreciate that before we come back to the next session. But what you will start to do by the end of these 7 sessions is start to discuss that vision, establish what that vision is and what it might look like for your school and how it relates to the bigger picture of the values in the school. And then start to map out your roadmap over those year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if you manage that even by the end of the 7th session, you will be doing well, and you will then start to use the larger, wider educational transformation resources that you'll have been signposted to from your self-assessment to start to build out further from the resources that we're going to supply in these sessions. So it's really important that we today cement the leadership and policy and the teaching and learning and start to think quite carefully about that. In later sessions, we'll go and talk about intelligent environments and student success. In what that means, that in session 5, we'll look at about how to make those environments secure, how to make them data compliant, how to make them responsive to change, how to analyze the data that's in there in those intelligent environments. So making the platform work for us. So we're not worried about how that happens. That might be down to our IT support team or our internal IT department. But what we get is high quality feedback that helps us inform our vision and also our rollout to staff and the change that we're going to bring about. And then also thinking about, well, all of this is just driven by, we want success for the staff, we want success for the students. And is it going to transfer into success? Is it going to build capacity for that? Or is it going to detract from it? And if it detracts from that, you need to go all the way back to that vision planning document and that year 1 to 5 planning and start to think about, again, a better way to do it. it's not unheard of for some schools to start that process, roll out the first pillar or roll out the first strategy, and that you can hit some barriers and you can spend quite a bit of time then going back and refining and revising and thinking about it. So what we need to do is develop our plan. We need a plan for communication. We need to think about capacity and building that change. We need to be constantly evaluating and being self-reflective, but not forgetting that if this is all going to be successful and it's going to meet the vision for the school, that we absolutely need to get the device provision, we need to get the IT support, we need to get the technical provision, because we do not want staff or pupils being turned off by their first exposure to the change, particularly if it's the very first change you're implementing, because something doesn't work like you've promised it, and then you get that utter disengagement and that disillusionment moving forwards, where they're more resistant to change when they come against it a second time. It needs to be slick, it needs to be planned. You need to put in the groundwork with your digital transformation group, that you're rolling it out, you're testing it, get a small group of staff and maybe a class of pupils that are willing and open to it, and they see the value in adopting it early, so that when it comes to the wider staff, it is a very smooth process. So as far as this afternoon is concerned, I want to say thank you. I know there's an awful lot of information you've had to take on board there, particularly taking in 2 pillars of the educational transformation framework from Microsoft. As a follow-up to this meeting, I have all your email addresses if you've signed up for this session. And what I will do is send you all a share link on that address, and you can then access the documents I've shown you during this presentation. So if you're watching it back, don't worry, go and check your inbox, or if you haven't received it in your inbox, it may well be in your spam or your junk folder. Sometimes it does happen that SharePoint share links are detected like that. But start to have a go. And if I was going to ask you to prioritize something, think about your vision and start to then map out in the first year and the second year, and it will gradually evolve so you think what your longer term plan is, and then go back and think about those reflective questions that I've given you in the first 2 pillars. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Steph, as you are the person here this afternoon. Have you got any questions about that, or anything you want to discuss further?
No, that was good. I said here, Martin, at the slide earlier, I said, is there an example of the vision statement anywhere on the internet?
There are examples. I was going to try and see if I could lift one from a school that we work with at Turn It On, and see if we could give you a live, real example. I can't lay my hands on one right this very second, but there is one about the QMON vision statement in the document you get, and how they got their vision statement in how a vision statement should be constructed. But I will try and find one from a real live school